5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff.
All right. Are you ready?
Mm-hmm.
Nice and comfortable?
Yeah.
Okay. Valentina Gritti. I got it. Look at that. And then we have little Isabel here.
Yeah. First baby on the podcast.
First baby on the podcast. First baby in this room. Well, in this apartment since I've lived here, actually. So it's a big milestone for me. But also, yeah, definitely. She's famous now. She's the very first baby on the Lucas Weaver show. So I was going to get her own mic, but you can't get it down that low, you know. And then it's just, I think she can just pass the messages along to you. But she really is, like, I know everybody kind of says this, and I told you this when we met for coffee a couple of weeks ago. Like, you know, everybody's going to say, oh, your baby's so cute. She really is. I'm not sure if the camera can see her or not, but she really is like the sweetest baby I've ever seen. She just sits there and she smiles and she looks at you like you're the coolest person she's ever seen, which is super nice, I think.
Let's see in like 15 minutes, she's still like that.
Well, you know, it's interesting because you always, like, when you're not around kids, you're super supportive of all these things. Like, oh yeah, you know, I support breastfeeding in public. I support, like, you know, working moms being able to take their babies with them and all this stuff. And then it's like, then when it's you having to deal with a baby in a meeting, you know, so it's very easy to be hypocritical about that stuff. So here's my chance to not be a hypocrite and be inclusive because we have a baby on the podcast. So now, if we need to take any breaks, just let me know and we can always stop and pick it back up. Like, it's just clicking a couple of buttons here and there. So super easy to do. But yeah, so just, I guess, since we're on that topic, how old is she?
4 months.
4 months. Wow. And your partner is Mexican, right?
Yes, exactly.
And so Isabel was probably, is that a common Italian name as well, Isabel?
So in Italy, it would be Isabella.
A little prettier. The way you say it.
Isabel, it's like the Spanish version. Yeah.
There's lots of Isabels in Texas where I'm from. So look at her. She's so distracting. I can't help it. She just looks at you and she smiles and she's like, this is the coolest.
She knows we're talking about her.
Okay, so I think there's quite a few things that we can talk about. And one thing that I wanted to try to do, like, I wouldn't call it mistakes, but learning from previous podcast experiences, is I kind of just want to give people a little bit of an idea in the very beginning of like what all might be to come in the episode, you know, just like a little bit of a preview. So I always kind of start with people's story and then we just kind of like start from the beginning. Maybe it's good this time to do kind of more of like an overview. So definitely, you know, like who you are. You're obviously, like I said, you're Italian. And so then you know, came here. We're here in Rotterdam. So maybe just tell a little bit about kind of your background and how you ended up in Rotterdam.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So as you were saying, I'm Italian. I was born in a small town near Milano, so in the north of Italy. And I studied gastronomy as a bachelor of gastronomic sciences in a university near Torino, so still in Italy. And then for my master's, I moved to the Netherlands, to Wageningen, which is a...
Nice pronunciation there.
Yeah, especially. Yeah, it's a quite important university for food technology and agriculture. So I did my master's there in food studies, and it was a European master. So I studied there for 4 months, then 2 months in Cork in Ireland, then 2 months in Paris and 2 months in Lund in Sweden. And then I got back to Rotterdam this time for my first internship at Mars, the one of the chocolate.
Wow.
Yeah. And then I got a job at the Slow Food Youth Network. And then I just stayed here in the Netherlands.
And so now you're doing a couple of things. You're doing a podcast for the Slow Food Youth Network. And then you're also doing these workshops kind of around the city, introducing people to different types of food, different cultures behind the food. So you're doing quite a few things these days.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, and actually for the Slow Food Youth Network, I don't only do the podcast, but I'm really like global coordinator. So we work with different communities around the globe, and I help setting up these communities, and I help them develop projects And I organize international events, exchanges. Now with the COVID, we're a bit on a break for that. And
a lot of things are on a break.
Yes, exactly. And actually, we started the podcast more or less when the pandemic started, just to fill in our program and keep the network active. So that's how that started. And the idea was really to put the people that are part of these communities into the spotlight with the podcast as well.
Okay. And so that's probably a little bit, so the workshops you're doing aren't specifically slow food workshops, but you're also putting the spotlight on people on that as well, right?
Yeah, so I do those workshops also for my own company. So I have a company as a freelance, which is called Veganism. And with that, I organize events, especially here in the Netherlands and sometimes in Italy. And in those events, I really focus on sensory experiments with food. Yes, the baby is starting to say something as well. So I do organize food tastings, and also I organize cultural events around food, like you were saying, and I work with different artists to really look at food in different ways, in all the possible ways. Whereas for slow food, the events are more on the educational aspect of food, and capacity building workshops or exchanges between students, for example, and other youth in our network. And then every 2 years, Slow Food has this huge food fair / cultural event in which a lot of representatives of these communities from all over the world come together. And I normally develop the program of the youth that are part of these communities. So I do these two things parallel.
Yeah, so they're different. One is your own business, but then the other is with the Slow Food Youth Network. But they're both very related and very similar in kind of the activities that you're doing. And so I've told multiple people, when I talk to people about, who's next on the podcast and whatever, and I say that, you're with Slow Food, I've gotten so many questions of people saying, well, what is slow food? And I have to be totally honest that the only reason I particularly know about it is because my ex-girlfriend studied abroad in Rome for 3 months. And then in one of her, she did a master's, I think, in cultural studies in at the VU in Amsterdam. And so in her program, she was talking, they learned a lot about not just slow food, but a lot of things. There's this whole kind of modern art movement around, slowness and this kind of stuff. And so the slow food movement, I thought, she told me about it years ago, and I thought it was incredibly interesting, because I'm the opposite of it. I think slow food is when McDonald's is taking forever on my fast food order. So why don't you just kind of tell people a little bit about what the slow food movement is, how it kind of got started, and just what that means.
Yeah, so slow food started, as you also mentioned, as a reaction to fast food, initially. And the idea is to work towards a good, clean and fair food system. So good, of course, we mean that the food should taste good.
Because you're Italian, so.
Yeah, but not only. Everywhere the food can taste good or real, no? An original taste, let's say. And then clean because it's grown in a sustainable way and traded in a sustainable way. And fair because it's fair towards the producers, but also towards the consumers. So these are the 3 principles of slow food. And it started in Italy, but then it developed, and now it's a worldwide movement. And we are divided in convivia and communities that locally are working towards this more sustainable food system. And the main office is still in Italy, in a small town that is called Bra. It's a fun name, but it's called like that. And it's in the north of Italy, near Torino. And it's also where my university was. So this was my first connection with slow food. So via the University of Gastronomic Sciences. And I work for the Slow Food Youth Network, which is a branch of Slow Food, which was created by originally by Dutch youth. So this is why the headquarters are in the Netherlands.
I didn't know that.
And actually, it started just as a Dutch network first. So for a lot of years, it was just a Dutch movement. Then it started to spread also in other countries, like in Brazil, for example, in Germany, in Italy a bit slower. It's weird, but like the youth movement arrived a bit later. And then 4 years ago, Jorit Kivik, that is the director, my colleague at Slow Food Youth Network, he had the idea of creating also the global office of the Slow Food Youth Network. And so we started officially this journey together. And so now we're working, really focusing on the youth between 18 to 32 years old. And my baby is having hiccups.
Yeah, poor thing.
And it's always, we also lost a shoe in the meanwhile.
I heard the hiccups starting before and I was like, oh no, poor thing.
But this goes on for half an hour. So I think you can put some music in the background.
I understand, man. If I had the hiccups, I would be just sitting here trying to hide it and mute my mic or something. But no, you can't help it. Okay, but so you said that it started, the slow food movement, it started in response to fast food. There was one incident, right, in particular where it was like, I think it was a Starbucks was trying to open in Italy, or in a city in Italy. And
no, the McDonald's opened in Rome. The first McDonald's opened in Rome. And then as a reaction, like they say, okay, let's start the slow food movement. So
it's funny because I have no experience with babies, you know, so it's like I feel my reaction is, do we need to take a break? Do we need to stop? Like help her out? You know,
I can tell you when we cannot stand it anymore.
And then you pick her up and then she's good.
Yeah,
you know, so
she gets bored quite easily. So like if you change position, usually it works for a couple of minutes. Yeah.
So far, it seems to me like she's a McDonald's fan and she's upset that we're talking bad about it. So,
yes, probably we'll see. But yeah, but also regarding Starbucks, since you mentioned it, like I think the first Starbucks opened just a couple of years ago in Italy. Before that, there was no Starbucks at all because, I don't know, Italians are really they really care about their coffee tradition. So there was a huge debate about like, should we let Starbucks open or not? And then the first one opened in Milano. And then it was a great success. And then it started to open everywhere, basically. So there was like this movement in favor of Starbucks and then the more like conservative people against it. But that's a big discussion around that.
It is very interesting, the whole discussion, I think, because it's funny as an American when you come to Europe and then you constantly hear about people talking about the Americanization of the rest of the world. And that's always a bad thing from their, point of view. And I understand what they mean. And I do think in many ways it is a bad thing because we're not doing the best in a lot of different metrics. You know what I mean? So the whole world can't act as, let's say, behave as poorly as we have for the past, 50 years or so. But what is interesting is it is kind of like, so the stuff that sometimes people get afraid of, I think, is what is a little bit misguided. And always, I think politicians cause a lot of this because politicians will just take one thing and then they know enough people care about it and then they just get everybody aggressively against it. For instance, like here in the Netherlands, there's a lot of, I think over 50% of the master's programs taught in the Netherlands are taught in English. And there's this growing fear in the Netherlands that like English is going to, replace Dutch and all this kind of stuff. And I think anybody who knows Dutch people and knows how much they love to speak Dutch to each other knows Dutch is not per se going to go away. But there, I'm sure, is more of a danger of like, if you're Dutch and you go to Amsterdam and Rotterdam, like you're not going to see any Dutch. You're not going to hear any Dutch, like there are some, I think, issues there. But politicians will take that and then they just run with it and have a whole platform of like, I'm the anti-English politician. And then you're guaranteed the votes of all these people, who hate English. So I guess the point that I'm trying to make is like when we were growing up, we had fast food, we had this explosion of all these things, but then your own local cuisine didn't really go anywhere. Like your mom still has the recipe from her mom that she learned and she still knows how to find these raw ingredients and cook these kind of things. So that's often a fear is that like say in Italy, when the first Starbucks is going to come or when McDonald's comes, it's like the other stuff is going to go away. And that I think is one of the misplaced things because there's tons of things wrong with fast food, right? That I think the slow food movement kind of tries to address. But sometimes it just seems like the fear is what the first thing that happens is the fear of like, okay, McDonald's is here. All of our traditional, not even just like Italian, but say like local Pulian food or something like that. You're afraid that these small little traditional foods are going to go away.
Yeah, but in a way, that is also true. So, I mean, I agree that people should have a choice. So, if someone wants to go and get a coffee at Starbucks, it's not like the end of the world. But in the other way, because of this like simplification and industrialization of the food chain, then we are indeed losing not only recipes, but really ingredients. There is a huge loss of biodiversity in the world because of monocrops. So we start producing monocrops, and
what is a monocrop?
Monocrops, it's like a single variety of fruit or vegetable that is like planted on like a huge portion of land, and people start to consume only that type of food, not a crop. Like for example, soy. It's a huge monocrop that it's it's cultivated in a lot of areas, especially in Brazil, for example. There was like all this huge debate of deforestation, and a lot of this deforestation is due to soy plantations, and other monocrops are corn, for example, or also cash crops, like for example, like a cotton or coffee, cacao, all these crops that are like normally only one variety that is used from the industry, and then all the others are just put aside, and at some point they're lost because no one cultivates them anymore. And the reason is that for the farmers, it's much easier and much more profitable to grow that type of crops. And also normally these crops are also subsidized by governments, or that sometimes have deals with multinationals, like for example, Monsanto, that these multinationals, they provide farmers with seeds, they provide farmers with the chemicals to grow the seeds. And then they start to use those. And then for the first years, it is indeed much more productive, but then yes, she also gets angry because of this.
She's topic. Passionate. I can see it.
So so basically the first year it is more profitable, but then it starts to become a sort of slavery because they always have to grow those seeds and use those fertilizers, because also the land, the soil becomes less productive. And then if you plant like your normal seeds of before, they don't grow anymore. So you still have to use like those like hybrid seeds, for example. And also another thing is that normally these seeds that are sold like with the package, you cannot really keep them. Like the farmers cannot keep the seeds and plant them again next year, but they always have to buy it because the second and third generation of seeds is less powerful. So that's also the trick. Whereas with a normal traditional crop, you can just keep a part of the seeds aside and then just keep growing it, and you are independent from the commerce. So that is a big deal. And that comes with the industrialization, which is partially also Americanization, as you called it.
Yep, sure. Okay, so very interesting. So what happens is, let's say you have these communities in Italy. I'm sticking with Italy because it's where the movement, generated. But let's say you have these communities in Italy. There's already kind of a balance, let's say, marketplace there. You have a lot of local producers of different, crops or coffee, whatever. And so they obviously, I don't think, produce coffee
exactly.
in Italy.
They
you know what I mean?
Coffee.
Yeah. So you have these local kind of, producers and people that do things, and it's all kind of in a much more localized way, right? It's a much more kind of like, you've been doing this for years and years, and there's this balance, and there's enough demand for these local, farmers or artisans or kind of whatever it is to actually produce these things and get paid for it. But then once let's say McDonald's or a Starbucks or somebody like that comes in, there's clearly going to be demand for that because it's very high in, terrible ingredients that taste really good. It's very fast. They're very efficient at it, right? So some of the demand definitely at least is going to shift. When that demand shifts to a McDonald's or a Starbucks or something like that, that's less demand to the restaurants that are getting supplies from those local suppliers and stuff. So then therefore the money for the local suppliers goes down, and it's more expensive in this day and age for those local suppliers to kind of stay alive anyway. So now it kind of makes it harder and harder and harder for those kind of local diversified, like you said, if you were growing, let's just say theoretically, do you know a crop that's grown in Italy, like, I don't know, olives or something like that? So let's say we had 3 different varieties of olives or something like that. And then it was supported because whatever region in Italy you're in, the restaurants would get the olives from that kind of regional supplier. And then after a Monsanto's or some, big conglomerate comes in, and they just streamline all that into one, and they say, okay, we're going to pay you this much to produce this one type of olive that, like you say, is not easily reproduced. Like, you're going to have to keep buying it from us. What you're saying is that because when those big companies come in and the money's there and they shift the demand, it makes it harder and harder for people who are actually in a sustainable way growing the local varieties that come from that region to survive long term.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so let's say it's a complicated matter, but also because, so with the example of olive oil, I should open a whole new chapter about that, because there also on European level, there is like all a debate when you call it like a European olive oil or extra European, but maybe we can also get into that. But to reply to your question, so it's not only the shift in demand, but it's also that normally those crops that I was saying before, or like this industrialized agriculture that is focused on massive production, gets more subsidies from government. So this is why it's also cheaper. So the raw material is cheaper. So it's not only the demand that makes it cheaper, but really like the raw materials. So it's kind of the fault of the government, huh?
Yeah.
And let's see if it works like that. So, for example, in Europe, we have the Common Agricultural Policy, the CAP, the CAP, which is like the biggest budget, let's say, that goes to agriculture. And it was first made after the Second World War, when there was a need to increase the food supply because people were starving. So there was a reason for which the money went to big farms,
right,
because we needed to produce more food.
Yeah.
But then, like, during the course of the year, that became like an industrial intensive agriculture with the use of a lot of chemicals, which, by the way, came also from the war industry, which turned from like chemical weapons into chemical fertilizers. And so we had like all these...
Not a good transition for us food eaters, I would say.
Exactly. So basically we're coming now from years of like this intensive agriculture with a lot of chemicals, and the soils became degraded also because of that. Degraded, you say?
Yeah. You could also, I don't know if
like
you'd say degraded
kind of,
or degraded. I think degraded, the way you said it is, for some reason I can't get it out of my mouth, but the way you said it first is correct.
Okay, so it's like that. That's the concept, so that you cannot really grow well in those soils anymore. Now we just had like the CAP reform. So we had the chance of like rewriting the Common Agricultural Policy, which is like this huge budget and regulations for agriculture. Mm-hmm. But it's still kind of the same as before. So it's quite, sad. But because also we saw that in Europe, there was like the European Green Deal. So all this movement towards food sustainability, the farm to fork strategy, which set a lot of targets like for pesticide reduction, for example, and like to promote a sustainable agriculture. But then nothing went into the CAP. So in the end, like the money always goes to the big ones. So this also is like the main reason why we have those still like this kind of industrialized food system based on cheap resources, grown in a wrong way, and also with really long supply chains. So things that are grown in the other side of the world, like, I don't know, for example, soy grown in Brazil, which goes to pigs that are farmed in North Carolina, and then the meat is sold in China.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
that's actually very common, that whole supply chain there. How you doing, Isabel?
I think Isabel is a bit hungry now.
we can take a little break.
Maybe, yes.
It's a good spot because then I can ask the next question right on top of that. So we'll be right back. Okay, I don't remember where exactly we left off. We were talking about.
Well, I think the common agricultural policy, maybe the money.
Oh yeah, the governments and the subsidies and stuff like that. So
talking bad about governments and multinationals.
Always fun. Nobody gets mad. They don't care. What I find very interesting about this is that. So what you're talking about with the subsidies and stuff from the government and these, especially in agriculture, it's a huge problem, I think, globally, and but especially in countries that are huge agricultural producers, like in Europe and the United States, and also in South America. But so for the U.S., like we have this huge problem with corn. Like high fructose corn syrup is one thing that they stuff in all of the food, and one of the reasons for that is because corn is like. Every 4 years when people are running for president, they go to Iowa and they start talking to the Iowans about how we're going to keep these corn subsidies because American corn farmers are the backbone of our, country and blah, blah, blah. And it's the same thing as what you talked about before from World War II is obviously if you want to be a superpower and if you're trying to prepare for, a huge war, you need to be able to supply enough food for yourself. And China can't do that, right? So that's like one of China's largest geopolitical challenges is that they cannot supply enough food for their population on their own. So if they decide to declare war on everybody, they better make sure that they have somebody on their side that can give them food and make sure that they can get it all the way there. Like if this is such a tangent, but anyway, in the US, we still have a lot of these traditions and mindsets and things left over from World War II. It's kind of like our identity is still tied to that, and then with the Cold War, so we're still kind of in that mindset of we got to have this crazy food production with all of these farms and all this stuff, just in case we ever have to fight a war against China or something that, we can supply our own food. And we have this image of farmers as being these like small town mom and pop farmers who are just trying to survive. And there are those people out there still, but mostly they've been driven out of business by these huge big food, type farms. And those subsidies that these politicians are handing out, that's this big, vicious, corrupt cycle with lobbyists and all these kind of semi-corrupt things going on. So when these politicians talk all about subsidy for, farmers, like nobody really wants to vote against that because it sounds like unpopular. But like what you're talking about, these subsidies kind of sound like a boring political thing, but they're actually a huge problem that for us as individuals and for our cultures long term.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, exactly. And also you mentioned that also like in the US, like there is like this idea of like producing more and more food, no? But the thing is we don't need so much food now because we are wasting 1/3 of the food that we are producing, and it's a lot. So with that 1/3, it will be enough to feed the people that are starving. So they are dying of hunger. So there is really not need to produce more, but there is a need to produce better quality, and also to distribute the food better, especially focused on like shorter supply chains and so on. So that, and also like you were mentioning China before, no? Like the fact that also they cannot produce enough food for themselves. I think it's interesting maybe to mention also another phenomenon that is happening, which is called land grabbing. Don't know if you ever heard of that. And yeah, it means that basically countries like, for example, China or also Japan or also other countries, like they are buying cheap land, for example, from Africa, and they are growing their crops there for their country. But most of the times they don't carry out sustainable agriculture at all. It's also intensive agriculture, and they are exploiting farmers there.
Yeah.
Yes, and Isabel also agree. And so they are basically destroying land from another country. And most of the time, those lands that are bought, they were owned by local communities or like indigenous communities that they cannot, like they owned it for like customary law. So they have been living there for ages, but they don't really have a contract which says that the land belongs to them. So the country automatically, the government say this land is of the government, is ours, because you don't have anything that proves that. And so they can just sell it to whoever they want in exchange of money. And the people that live there, they have to move away. So that there is also a problem of migration, of hunger, of wars, because people are sent away from their lands because of land grabbing. So that is a very, very important topic. And I think we are not talking enough about that. Also because it happens in the other side of the world. So as usual, we're always focusing on what we see. Yeah.
Well, I think that brings up a couple of interesting topics, because I told you, I think when we met before, I told you about my friend Bas de Groot, who he started Europe's first what do you call it? Like urban farm here in Rotterdam.
Yeah, the milk sommelier.
The milk sommelier.
I heard a bit of the podcast.
Oh, did you?
Yes.
He's such a fascinating guy, and like he knows so much about agriculture. And one of the things that he kind of, brought up on that episode about agriculture is that people oftentimes forget the culture part of agriculture, that there's such a huge part in this of how we've done things for thousands of years. Like he said, so you'll hear people talk about, he was the first person ever to talk to me about like happy chickens, and like trying to have this with sustainable farming. But he said like this idea that people want to, let's say, take a domesticated, farm cow, and they want to let that cow, like these are kind of more extremist, let's say, type people, but they just want that cow to be able to live for, 13 years or whatever. Or they want you to just let these chickens roam free. And then when they die, then you would maybe harvest them or something like that. And he was like, these aren't just, wild animals that if you let this chicken just live, he's going to live a happy life and then die. These chickens are bred to be killed in like 30 to 60 days or whatever. And they did experiments on the farm where they would let some of these, like they would mark a couple of chickens and say, this one doesn't get slaughtered. And they don't live very good lives after they hit that mark of when they're supposed to be slaughtered, because we as humans for 7,000 years have been breeding them in that way. Same thing with cows, I did a lot of research like about a year ago during the first COVID lockdown when you had so much free time, but like trying to figure out, if we didn't slaughter cows, like what would be their normal lifespan and stuff like that. And people are saying, you don't really know, because most of these cows like that are domesticated, on farms, like, I don't know if domesticated is the right word for that or not, but they.
Yeah, like a hybrid. No, they're like. They're also like hybrid, genetically selected.
Yeah, but they're not wild, right?
No, yeah.
And so it's like farmers spend so much money keeping them healthy, keeping them alive, like, all this stuff like the antibiotics and all these different things that they put them on, which, you can debate the ethics of that and whatnot. But there's not a lot of such thing anymore as what you picture in your mind of these kind of just like wild roaming free buffalo or something, like a wild, like a cow is just going to be out in the wild like a buffalo. Like we as humans have, through agriculture and through the science of this, bred these animals to be the way that they are today for the purpose of us eating them or us getting their milk or things like that. So you can't really separate that. If you're going to be a part of the food supply chain where you consume it at the end, you can't just, like what you were talking about during the break, of separate yourself and think, no, I get mine, from a happy cow that does this and that. It's like, I think it's very difficult to be ethical in a way about this, because there's just so many different factors and so many different things going on, because like you say, it's such a complicated global supply chain that's so far removed from us as the people who consume the food.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But also regarding that, like we have, of course, like different breeds of cows. So there are not like really wild cows anymore, as you were saying, but there are also still some breeds that are really farmed in a more like natural way or like more wild way, and they are really in harmony with the ecosystem where they are raised. So I don't know, for example, the Chianina in Italy, it's a type of, it's a breed of cow, to make an example, and they are semi-wild. And also, if you remove the cow from that ecosystem, the ecosystem collapses. And that happens with that cow, but with a lot of different animals. So we also have to think about farming or animal farming as something that, in a way, is part of nature as well. And humans, as you were saying, have raised those animals for years and centuries, and they have co-created a type of ecosystem which is special, and it exists because of the animal as well. So now another problem of industrialized agriculture is the separation from animal farming and crop farming. So and that causes also the fact that with agriculture you always need chemical inputs, or maybe not chemical, but external inputs or manure or fertilizers, because you don't have the animals anymore that are doing that job.
Right.
So that is also important, and that's not only like the technical part of like the crops and the farming, but also the cultural part around it. So, for example, with Slow Food, we are promoting a lot what is called agroecology, which is this inclusive agriculture which considers like the environmental and ecological part, as well as the really cultural part connected to it. So it's like the whole package, let's say. And that type of agriculture is sustainable. Of course, it's not like massive production. So that means that it wouldn't be possible that all over the world we eat the same bean, for example, but it's more focused on like different varieties, different breeds that are connected with a certain type of territory. So also food should be more localized in that sense. There are still some communities or some cases that are working in that way, that are still living in that agroecological ecosystem, but they're disappearing together with a lot of varieties that are disappearing and biodiversity that is lost.
Yeah. I love that. So when we had this conversation before, that's what I loved about you is like the knowledge that you have. And I think like what happens to a lot of people like me and a lot of people that I know is they know so little about this. And every time somebody comes at you from a food sustainability point, you automatically think like vegan, or they're going to tell you not to eat meat, and they're going to tell you don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. And from our last conversation, like it was very clear to me that like you kind of had a very good perspective of the entire thing from, kind of an overhead view. And you have a lot of solutions based like thinking and a lot of ideas of not just ideas like things you want to do, but things that you see that are kind of already in play that just need more attention and more whatever. And one of the things I read after we had that conversation was that a lot of people, it's kind of like this easy and safe thing to just say like, okay, well, I want to help the environment, so I'm going to go vegan, and that's all I have to do now. Like, oh, I'm vegan, I'm sustainable now, I don't have to do anything. And this article that I read said that in 2018, there was this huge study about, the carbon emissions from the agricultural, industry. And obviously the main takeaways that people kind of ran with were beef is terrible for carbon emissions. But even like, so I don't remember the exact metric, how they measure it. You maybe know this, but it was like 4 times, what is it? It's like, whatever the kind of metric was of like for emissions per, square meter farmed or something like that. It was like chicken was 4, almonds was 2.5, cashews was like 4. There were avocados were almost as much as chicken, you know what I mean? So it was kind of like, this included everything from like water use, like how much water does it take to farm it, the production methods or the harvesting methods, where is it shipped? Because, avocados can only grow in very few places in the world, and then they have to be transported all across the world. So if every European decided tomorrow, oh, we're going to be vegan, but we're going to use avocado as like our main, protein and fat source and whatever. That's not good for the planet either, because it's, so what this article was saying is that the thing you just said about also farming with animals and crops together, you use the manure from the cows and the chicken and whatever, and use it as fertilizer instead of importing these harmful chemicals. So they were saying like the biggest problem is the extreme length in the supply chain of like stuff being grown in South Africa. And like you say, in South America, then going to North Carolina, then going to China. Like that's a big problem. But then also this idea that you can just, let's say, replace meat with these, alternative sources, but then you're still using so much water to produce it that we have to think about it from the actual goal of having a more sustainable, food industry and food supply methods, and not just everything so cut and dry. We want to feel good about ourselves, so we're not going to eat meat or do this. And you have a lot of knowledge on kind of real world things that where people like me who are watching this don't feel like, oh, this is some crazy liberal coming at me telling me I'm evil. It's just very common sense, like fact-based things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. It's not only fact-based, but there are studies that have been made that show that there are some cases in which actually it is important to keep farming because it's part of ecosystems. Like, for example, there is researcher who is also a professor and a friend of mine who is called Gabriele Volpato, and he's really studying that ecology, and he made some research in Tanzania and Kenya, and he has shown that in those environments that he studied, the role of farming is really central, no, for that ecosystem. So it's not something that I just invented, but there are really studies about it. The problem is that those type of studies, they are not so much financed, because most of the research is still financed by big corporations. And it's not, of course, in the interests of corporations to have such studies not to be financed, because, of course, they are in favor of like more massive production, not really agroecological production in which farmers are just self-sufficient and they live in a sustainable way, and they are able to have food sovereignty. So able to produce the food that they consume, which is also another big topic, especially in the south of the world, no? That people are producing a lot for export, and then they don't have the food that they need for themselves, and they have to buy it from abroad. So it's really nonsense, the whole thing.
Yeah, the studies thing is difficult because I follow this PhD researcher he's postdoctorate now, but he's researcher at I think it's UCLA or something like that. But anyway, he was talking about there's this huge misconception about these studies. And if you see, okay, Coca-Cola paid for this study or this person paid for this study, people automatically assume like, oh, don't trust the study, like it must be flawed or whatever. And they're like, that's not how it works. It doesn't matter who funds it. Once we publish something, it has to be peer reviewed and everybody gets the chance to, make sure, and it has to be repeated, right? You have to kind of repeat the results in order for it to be accepted. However, what you said is that the reason why Coca-Cola will fund certain studies is because they hope that the outcome will be beneficial to them.
Exactly. Yeah.
So there have been tons of studies recently that have come out that have actually shown that the artificial sweeteners used in like your Coke Zeros and things like that don't cause cancer. Like this was a big myth that came out, freaked everybody out. And now there have been tons of studies. The science is 100%, effective that or accurate that they don't cause cancer. And mostly it was Coca-Cola and Pepsi and these huge companies paying for that, but that doesn't make the science different. You know what I mean? But then when you have people who are trying to study things that might not fit the narrative of a Coca-Cola or a Monsanto's or something like that, they're not going to fund that. Like they don't want that information to come out there. So it is difficult that for these people to kind of get the funding and prove these things that we really all should, I guess, know more about. But I want to ask you specifically, like, so what are some things, because, I think a lot of people want to eat in a way that's healthy for the world. They want to live in a way as reasonable as they can. And it's very difficult. Like after our last conversation, I was looking at, okay, maybe I should just only I looked at all the different grades of the chickens here in the Netherlands and how they're raised and stuff. And it's like, even if you get the ones that they say are better, it's still like the standards for that are 11 chickens per square meter. 11 chickens in 1 square meter. That's a lot of chickens still in a very small space, you know? And then if you read online, they say like, okay, well, technically a free range chicken just has to have access to a free range. But then in a lot of these, you know, chicken factory farming places, they just give them this tiny little hole in a gate to get out of. But a lot of the chickens don't even know it's there, can't find it. So most of them don't even go out into the open free range space. But then legally, that's technically qualifies as free range. So you go to the grocery store, you see the label, says free range, and you feel good about yourself. So the organic ones, though, if I wanted to get like fully organic, no chemicals added, you know, they're free range, whatever, it's like €8.50 for 400 kilograms of chicken. I mean, that's so expensive. You know what I mean? So I feel like a lot of people are like me, where you feel like you want to be a good person, you want to do good for the world, and we're trying to find, you know, tangible, actionable things we can do in our lives to be better. So what would you tell us to try to be better humans?
Yeah, so hard question, but so the thing the example you took now about chicken and the price difference is always about the fact that cheap chickens are subsidized, and also the food that cheap chickens eat is subsidized. No? And also important to say that in Europe it's still possible to use GMO corn and soy to feed animals, and then you don't have to declare it. So you don't have to say that my chicken is GMO, but then you can eat GMO crops. You cannot grow them in Europe, or not in all the countries, but you can still import it. So it's just a parenthesis. But what you can do, so first of all, regarding meat consumption, I think it's important to understand the value of meat, and also that like nutritionally we don't really need to eat that much meat. We don't need to eat meat every day. So I would rather say just eat meat like once every 2 weeks, but really buy a very good one. So buy organic one. It's okay if you pay a little bit more, but at least it's good for yourself. It's good for the environment. The other thing would be meet the farmers. So maybe they don't have the organic label, but they just have like more like free range chickens. And it's also a bit cheaper because it doesn't have the organic label. But that it's maybe like another step, no? Like if you want to go and meet the farm, maybe it takes a bit more effort. So like the easier way would be just eat a bit less meat, but eat a very good quality one. And then always try to go for the local products, not only meat, but really like everything. And seasonal, it's also very important. For example, fish. No? Like, did you know that like fish is also seasonal?
Yeah.
So, for example, here,
unless it's what do you call it, bioengineered fish that they grow in Panama that grows year round.
But the thing also with fish is that now, like, for example, let's take an example here in the Netherlands. So herrings. No, herrings, it's a very typical Dutch fish. Don't Dutch herrings. But it's, we don't like herrings. No, I think now she's a bit sleepy. But so herrings, you cannot fish them all year long. I think the period in which you can fish them is like in the summer, like I think June, but I'm not sure. So people should check that. And but what happens is that they fish herrings in different countries, so not only in the Netherlands, like in Norway, for example, in Germany, in Denmark, and then they deep freeze it, and you have like this huge quantity of herrings that you can sell all year round. But then there is an overfishing of herrings, which also causes problem to the ecosystem and so on. So the ideal would be that you just eat the fish in the moment of the year in which it's like the moment of fishing it. So it's also not an overexploitation. And the same thing is with the fruits, the vegetables. So it's nice to have strawberries in winter, but strawberries don't grow in winter. So if you want to grow them in winter, you need to have a lot more resources, like greenhouses and so on. And that is not sustainable. So also that means that you shouldn't be able to eat avocados in the Netherlands, which is now a staple food of everyone. But like if we start thinking a little bit more in that way, so So just starting from the smaller things, like, for example, see which producers or distributors are there where you live, which can provide you with local food and seasonal food. And just start buying those and reduce a little bit meat consumption, but buy a really good quality one. So I would start from that. So like not everyone has to become vegan, but just a bit more conscious of where and when your food comes from.
Yeah. So this is where your recommendation would basically be buy the €850 chicken and then just eat less chicken, which I'm a hypocrite and I'm not going to do, but I get that. And then also, so try to buy things that are grown in your kind of region. So because then it's like, it's better for, your environment there. You're, I guess, paying local people there for their efforts. And then also it's less, transportation all across the world and stuff like that. And I guess overall, like this is something that we should all be doing, is like not actually becoming addicted to avocados in the Netherlands because they, come from so far away and whatever. But some of these things, it seems like so out of reach. Like some of these things, it seems like they're so far gone. I mean, avocados are now in every single sandwich or dish or whatever salad that you want to, any place where you try to go eat healthy, avocado is going to be there. And I was trying to remember what else you said that was, and eat seasonally. So that's something that's definitely changed over the years. When I was a kid, I remember kiwis were like, one of my favorite fruits, probably my favorite fruit. And I would ask my mom, can you get some kiwis at the grocery store? And she's like, they're not in season because you can't have kiwis right now. Nowadays, though, like you seem to be able to get any fruit you want, like at any time, at least here in the Netherlands. I don't know if that's because it's all grown in greenhouses where they're tricking them with the lights and stuff. But it does seem like that has changed some. But okay, so I think it's interesting because I do think like I've told you this before. It's like I feel like I should eat less meat to be more ethically if you care about the planet, if you care about climate change and this kind of stuff. And this is why we were talking about the stem cell beef. And I guess I've only kind of followed it with beef. I don't eat a lot of beef anymore, but I think if they did it with the stem cell stuff, I could be 100% behind it because the idea that you can feed the entire world as much beef as they basically wanted to without ever having to slaughter a cow, like I find that an incredible, proposition, and they're just making it more cost efficient and more cost efficient. And I like I told you before, is I fear that big food is going to come in and try to turn the public against stem cell beef or petri dish beef, whatever they want to call it now. I'd hope they don't start to call it factory produced beef because nobody's going to want that. But anyway,
lab produced.
Yes. But my fear is that, we had the conversation that like, yes, there's always trade-offs, right? Like culturally, you lose a lot of the culture from agriculture when you're producing meat in a lab. But at the same time, like what I find so challenging is like we as Americans, we eat so much beef for the past 100 years, you know what I mean? Give or take, whatever it's been. Let's say 80 years just to be safe. And now that the climate crisis is here and other countries are just now getting wealthy enough for all of their people to eat beef. Oh, nope, sorry. Now it's unethical to eat beef. Like you can't do it. I know you want to because we've been doing it for 80 years, but now you can't, So I feel very hypocritical about that when the developed countries are always doing the bad things. It's like you're the older brother, in the family and you do all the bad stuff. And now the parents are like telling the younger, no, you can't do that because your older brother did it and ruined it for you. So that's why I'm very hopeful about the stem cell beef thing is I think like also the health stuff, like there's a lot of stuff because, you have these like this entire kind of like neural network in your stomach. And everybody has a different kind of neural setup in your stomach, right? For some people, the amino acids from meat, your body responds much better to those. And for some people, it's plant-based is better for you. But if you're somebody whose body wants, meat, amino acids, like you're not going to be as healthy as you would be if you were, totally vegan. So I think it's something that it's like, it's very complicated with this stuff. And I just think that there's too many of the voices out there where it's like, no, all meat is evil. And that's why I think the stem cell thing is going to be an easy one to turn on because they say, oh, it's, robots are making your food and it's, not real and whatever. And I can just see rich Republicans paid off by lobbyists just ruining the thing before it can even get started.
Yeah. So, okay. As an answer to that, yes, I agree that it can be one of the solutions, but not only. I mean, Yeah, regarding like the cultural part, I'm not, yes, of course, like I'm concerned about the cultural part, but also about all the ecosystem part that I was talking before, no? All this, like the ideal world would be, of course, to have like an agroecological type of agriculture with farming and crop production, and that it's linked with the culture. So for me, that would be really the solution. Then, of course, like the easiest and like more large scale solution would be, yes, cultured meat.
Cultured meat. That's a good way to say it. That sounds much better.
Not lab grown Frankenstein.
The Franken meat.
Yeah, but regarding the nutritional part, also like putting there a bit of
Go for it.
Oh, my baby, she's tired now. She's starting to be a bit. Poor her. She doesn't like the boring science part. But so it's not that like people like digest easily like meat proteins that come from meat. Yes, it can be, but like there is a whole balance thing in our
you can take a break if you need to. Don't feel like you have to
maybe just a second
rush through.
So maybe I can manage to make her sleep and then I can talk about the nutritional part of meat.
Okay, we're back.
Baby fell asleep.
It was so instant. It was like as soon as I hit the button and we stopped all the cameras and stuff, it was just like, and you held her sideways. She was like, I'm out. So yeah, man, she's just such a funny baby. Like I'm telling you guys, like in the breaks, she just stares at me and looks so interested in everything I say or do. And it's just like, it makes me feel so good. And then we come here and we sit down and then she's like not happy, so then I feel bad. Like, and anyway, so, okay, you're about to say the health effects of meat. That's what you were talking about. Digestion.
The digestion. So basically, it is true that it's easier to absorb, not only proteins, but mainly like iron from meat, but also from plants. Like if you process them in the correct way, and also if you combine it, for example, with vitamin C, like the iron is more easier to be uptaken, and then also a lot of the absorption happens in the intestines. Also, there the most varied your diet is. The most varied your diet is, the broader the range of microbiota that you have, and then the healthier you feel. So if you eat a lot of plants, a lot of different plants, different varieties, automatically you have a larger microbiota and you feel better. So also those people that maybe stand better meat, yes, it can be, but that means that they should shift something in their diet so that they can digest better also the proteins coming from plants. So also like eating only meat, it's like the short-term solution.
No, yeah. I'm not at all advocating for the carnivore diet or anything like that. And I do want to make it clear that I'm not trying to what's the word? Like, I think people, even if you eat meat daily, like, I'm not saying that we should eat it the way that we have traditionally in the US, where it's like, huge hamburger or something and some French fries. Like maybe there's some lettuce on your burger. Like, no, I think that, vegetables are something that people should definitely, especially in the US, like eat more of. And one of my biggest pet peeves is when you hear people who eat like a normal diet, they don't eat enough vegetables. And then everybody now at some point goes on a vegetarian kick. So then they go vegetarian for a month and like, I feel so much better. Everything feels better. I'm like, you didn't eat any vegetables before. Now you packed a whole bunch of vegetables in your diet and you feel great. If you still ate chicken breast for dinner every night, but then you also ate vegetables with it, you would still feel pretty good. But
that's it. Yeah.
So that's one of the things that bugs me. And even, with like still having meat in your diet, that I still, think like maybe a Mediterranean diet, these kind of things, like that's probably the best and, healthiest way. But Also, this stuff that I'm referring to, it's pretty new, I think, research, because I don't think it's that long that they've known about this entire kind of like your nervous system actually being present in the stomach. Like they kind of thought before, I'm way out of my depth here trying to explain this, you know what I mean? But I follow this neuroscientist, Andrew Huberman. I'm like a total fanboy. I tell everybody about him all the time. And he has this whole episode on food and nutrition and digestion and all this stuff. And he says that it's, previously it was thought that like the kind of, nerve endings and stuff in your stomach basically just kind of like sent messages to the main stuff up in your brain. But it's actually a part of your nervous system. Like it's almost like an extension of your brain in your gut. And it has so many kind of ramifications because it, is linked with, your response to sugar. Processed foods are terrible for these reasons. But they found that this is totally only with the nervous system and your brain and the nerves and neurons, I guess. I don't know if it's technically a neuron, but in your stomach. I think it's neurons in your stomach. And these, they've done big studies on and it's usually with like well-produced meat. It's not just kind of, like grocery store chuck beef or something like that. But it's very interesting data on the different response of different people's nervous system in your gut to what types of amino acids that your body gets. So I'm not trying to make something of like, oh, well, the carnivore diet's better for some people and some people the vegetable. No, like I think an omnivoric diet with probably, 15% meat and then 85% vegetables is based on science, probably the healthiest and best way to go. And I think I only make this case because you're probably the only person that I've gone into this much depth in, these conversations about. So I hope it doesn't sound like I'm trying to, sugarcoat it into some, like we should all be, eating 3 hamburgers a day and whatever, because everybody's body's different, but
yeah. And taste is different.
Yeah. So, but no, I think you present some really good information. And every time I have somebody that's like so much smarter about stuff like you are than me on all these topics, like it's all I start thinking about is then because you like to think that you're doing things based on fact. And then you're like, well, why am I doing this? Why am I doing that? So even just, listening to you and then making me do more research and find more out, I find a lot of, value in that. So really, I think really helpful to kind of just hear different perspectives that are still based on sense,
Mm-hmm. Thanks.
So I really want to talk about, because I don't know how long she's going to be asleep, but I really want to talk about 2 things before you go. The first one being these workshops that you're doing, around Rotterdam. And I think you're also going to do them in other locations if people are interested there. So yeah, I want to talk about these workshops and like how you kind of got started with that. What's your goal with them? What could people do to maybe support you to do more? Kind of that whole situation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So those workshops, actually, I started my company because I was missing a little bit the science part of food, because I was already working for a slow food, and there is a lot of like this cultural part and like more marketing also related and so on. But I really wanted to put into practice a bit more of sensory analysis, which was a bit of my specialization in my master. So what is sensory analysis? It's like studying the flavors of food and the taste of food, and it's also linked about what the milk sommelier was talking to you in the other episodes. So really,
you guys should connect. I think you guys would have some great conversations.
Definitely, we should do some milk whiskey tasting, some pairings. So I was really, I've always been fascinated by that part of like people, how people react to or how they perceive food in a different way. And so I started by organizing tastings. So I did some whiskey tastings, chocolate tastings, and I really like organizing events in general. And I like working with different people and creating new things and new collaborations. So then I started to work also with musicians and artists. And I have a project also with my partner, who is a musician and composer, which is called Beat Dinners. And there's like beats, like the beat music beat, and then eat, like eating. And there we really try to do this food experiences with music. So we try to investigate how music and sounds affect the way you perceive food. So, for example, the latest project we did was chocolate tasting, in which we paired each chocolate with a certain sound. And by listening to that sound, you could perceive, for example, the chocolate crunchier, or it brought you back to your memories. Or but it really worked.
Yeah, for sure.
And the fun thing was that we did it with a bunch of different people, and most of them gave us a similar feedback where they were trying the chocolate and paired to the music. So without us telling them, so you should perceive it maybe crunchier, or you should think about, a trip. Well, they were telling us that. So it was like, okay, yeah, it really worked. And there is also some research going in that direction. So that is something that I'm doing. And also, as I was telling you, like collaborating with different people. So I also have another project that we just started, where you have also been to the first performance that is called Dat Smaakt naar meer, which translated into English, it should be like, it tastes like something more. And it's a project that I've done with a spatial designer and like a theater or storytelling coach. And together we build up this project in which there are 4 women of Rotterdam from different cultural backgrounds that tell their story, but starting from a special dish. So, for example, a dish that their father prepared when they were children and so on. And then we prepare that dish and people taste it while listening to the story. And then there is also the whole setting. Maybe you can also say something about your own experience about that. And we have just done like the pilot version, and then we intend to do it also in different places with different people that tell the story. So that is also something that I'm working on. And now also on the 10th of December, I have an event coming up also here in Rotterdam in the windmill of Delfshaven. And it's also a beat dinner project. So there we're going to do, it's called the food trip. So we have different foods from...
Mushrooms, you can have mushrooms there.
Of course. But like a local like grown mushrooms. And not really like a trip like mushrooms. No. Maybe yes.
Not that I would ever do
but
that.
I cannot say it here. we talk privately
there
about
we
it.
go.
Yes. But so the idea is that people are gonna enter the windmill and then they're gonna experience the different foods with also like music sensors. So where they are gonna go into a trip, like walking and tasting
like
and listening. Exactly. So that it's coming up on 10th of December. So if people are here, maybe they can check my Instagram and see more details. I don't know the timing yet, but
go ahead and throw out what your Instagram username is.
Vale.gastronom, which is also the name of my company, Vale Gastronom. VALE.GASTRONOME. Gastronom.
Oh yeah.
Okay, maybe I'll send you the link and you can put it.
I have it already. No, I can give it to people, but just in case they're listening and want to see that. No, and I should also say shout out Adrian. Thank you very much for hooking us up, because she was the reason why I came to that workshop. Well, also Pietro, I should mention him as well, because so he had mentioned that she was doing this workshop. There was a couple of times we're going to go out and I was like, oh, see if, Adrian wants to come. And then he was like, oh, she's doing this, workshop thing and rehearsing. And I didn't really understand. Like he was just saying, oh, it's just this thing where she's going to cook some food for a bunch of people. And it's like some Malagasy food, that's going to be whatever. And so I didn't really know exactly what to expect. And I just thought I was going to go eat some food from 4 different countries that was going to be tasty. And I was hungry. So that was great. And then I show up and it's like, in a very cool venue, the Culture Hub in Delfshaven. Nice, dimly lit, but like super cool, authentic, unique furniture. I mean, it's just a really cool place there. And then you walk in and it's like I said, it's dark and there's these cool lights set up. And then you sit down and it kind of just started off like a play, like you're in the theater or something. And then this lady, she's telling a story and it's very dramatic and you're like, oh, okay. So then you get kind of sucked in. And so it's very cool for me, I thought, because I thought it's a really nice, what do you call it? Joining, let's say, of performance art and, the cultural part of food. And I thought that was super cool because like you feel so much more connected to the food than when you eat it. So if you'd have just told me, okay, this food's from Curacao, it's made this way and you enjoy. Okay, well, it's food, tastes good, like whatever. But then when that lady tells you that whole story about her childhood and her father and all these things, it's like, I don't know, you take the food a little bit more consciously in a way, which is probably what you're trying to get people to do, because you are trying to get them to appreciate the kind of cultural background behind these foods, it seems.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. I think it has a lot of potential, because especially because Dutch people, that's right up their alley, like these types of cultural things. And so what's your kind of plan for those? Like how many? So this one in December is more focused on the sensory things of just kind of all that stuff with your partner who does the composing and stuff like that. Yeah. But then as far as like the type of performance art workshops, you said that was the pilot. So what's the plan in the future for those?
So now we have already an invitation to do it in Eindhoven. So I don't really have more information about it, but I know that something is going on.
Something's cooking.
Something's cooking, yeah. So probably there will be another version there. And then the idea is really, we would like to start a stichting.
Mm-hmm.
With that foundation, sorry, yeah.
No, it's finally called a stichting because it is a little bit different, I think, in Dutch, but I'm just for any non-Dutch listeners.
Mm-hmm. So, and then with that, really start a real project and travel around the Netherlands first with that, and then maybe also Italy or somewhere else.
Oh, go big, international.
But a step,
Baby steps.
Yeah. So for now, the first version was great. Like we were sold out for the 4 times we repeated it, and even overbooked, I would say. And almost everything went smooth. We're really, really happy about it. Now we are about to release the video of the dinner. So if people are interested to see how that actually looked like, they can do it very soon. And so for that, updates are coming soon.
All right.
And then 10th of December we have this event with the beat dinners, and then we'll see. I really like to collaborate with different people. So if someone is listening to the podcast and like wherever he is or she is in the world, and they would like to do something with me related with food culture, food science, for food experiments, please just get in touch with me, and I'm super happy to brainstorm maybe and see what we can do together.
Nice. That's so cool. Well, yeah. So follow Valentina on Instagram. She just hit 1,000 followers a couple of days ago. I saw. Congratulations on that. Because then you post the updates there, and then people can get in touch on Instagram and stuff like that. So that's very cool. And I really would love to connect you with Boss, because right now he's doing, I know you watched the episode, but now he's doing a community supported agriculture project called CSA Het Middenland. So it's in Maasland, I believe, which is like right outside Maaslaus. I went out there a few months ago, and it was like hour bike ride. So I just gotten a new bike, new to me. So I biked all the way there, and I was exhausted, but it was so nice out there, man. And you have all these people who are doing exactly what you're talking about. They're trying to buy locally grown, farmed, totally organic, vegetables. They also have some plans, I think, in the future to do things besides vegetables, because it's actually on a bigger farm. He just kind of leases out a part of it, but he's trying to do the exact same thing that, you're talking about, of what would be better for the world. And man, they've been having some good content on. He also has an Instagram. I think you can follow it. I think it's CSA_ Het Middenland, something like that. But it's in people I follow if people want to just stalk me and see. Mm-hmm. But anyway, they're doing great stuff, and I've been seeing some cool things in their Instagram. And when I went out there that day, there's so many people out there, and definitely a bit of an international crowd as well, that I definitely think if you wanted to kind of organize a tasting or a workshop or something like that, that he would already have a group of people who would be already up your alley, and interested in that stuff. Awesome. I'm trying to think if there's anybody else, but I'll definitely, spread it around, because I've already been so excited about this podcast and telling people. And because, man, I just think that the slow food thing is so cool, and just not enough people know about it. It sounds like one of these hippie things when you talk about it, and then that actually when you learn what it really is, it's not so hippie. So that's I think why I love the way that you tell that story. But Okay, so you got the one December 10th. Can people, is that one sold out as well?
No, we haven't started yet because we're still arranging like the details, like timing and stuff. But I think next week we will already announce where tickets can be bought and all the information. So just stay tuned.
Nice.
So there is still a space. And also regarding slow food, like if people are interested, it's good to know that there are slow food communities mostly everywhere in the world. So either slow food youth communities or also slow food a bit less youth communities.
Nice way to say old. A bit less youth.
No, I mean above 32, so it's not like that
Hey,
old.
sheesh.
No, yeah.
I'm 30, so
or 35 sometimes. But we also have like people that are above 40 that are part of the youth network, but they always feel young and they just want to stay with us. So it's also good.
There you go.
But so they can also check on the Slow Food International website or also on the Slow Food Youth Network website. And there we have a map where there are like all the contacts of local communities, so they can also get in touch. So for example, here in Rotterdam, we also have a Slow Food Youth Network and a Slow Food chapter. So they also organizing cool things, and it's nice to be in touch with them also all over the Netherlands and wherever. Also in the US, for example.
Yeah. And where can people find the Slow Food Youth Network podcast that you're the host of? So
in all the podcasting platforms, so Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever, it's called SFYN podcast. So SFYN, which is a Slow Food Youth Network.
Yep.
Or just search Slow Food Youth Network podcast.
Okay.
Yeah. And that, so I think the nice thing of that podcast is that you really listen to the voices of people that otherwise would be very, very hard to find. So sometimes like the audio quality is not like the best, but because we're really working with, people from indigenous communities in Congo, and they just send me their audios and their stories from there. So then we mix it up with like some music and forest sounds and things to make it a bit more like easier to get through. But the content is very, very special, let's say, and it's something unique. And we have different series, like some are more like storytelling based. So for example, we have a whole series about young indigenous people that are telling their story. Just simple, like, Masai, a guy from Kenya, a girl from Zambia, another one from Bolivia, and they're telling their experience related with slow food, of course. Then we have others that are more connected to a topic, like, for example, forest people and land grabbing, or women in fishing. Like, what does it mean to be a fisher woman, not a fisherman? Yeah. So, and in those cases, you have different voices from people in the world that are talking about the topic. So, yeah, I would suggest just listen to it. And also, if you have suggestions of topics you would like us to dig in, please let us know, or any feedback, then it would be also good to have it.
No, it sounds awesome. Like, you're doing so many cool things, so much kind of like interesting content. So that's awesome. Any last, I don't want to say any last words because it sounds like you're going to die or something. But any last things you want to touch on or mention or promote, anything like that?
Yeah, I would say, so no, not really promote, but of course, like if you want to get in touch, please, like I'm super happy to meet new people and get in touch, especially like around the topic of food. As you see, we can talk for, I don't know how long, like 1 hour or more
it's
about food.
End up being a little under an hour and a half, I would say. So
okay,
nice time.
We can talk a lot about food. And no, but I would say it's also, about like the whole sustainability talk and like how you can behave to be more sustainable. I know it's quite difficult, and also it's difficult to change people's habits. But I think now we are a bit in urgency to do things to change the current food system, because we simply cannot go on in that way. And if politicians don't come towards us, at least we have to start ourselves to do a change. So our small changes put together, they can make a big change. And we can also influence politics if we act together. So that would be my last message.
That's a great message, I think. And, I know it seems like I just sit there and kind of, whenever we have that conversation about all the different things, like it's very easy to kind of get caught up in things that you're identified with, and you do things in a certain way and you don't really want to change. So then you go to Google and it's like, why meat is not bad for the environment, so that you can find like whatever. But, it's easy, I think, to be objective about things that you don't care that much about or you're not that invested in. So like when the vaccine stuff, kind of happened, like I'm very pro-vaccine, and I tell people who don't want to take it, for the most part, everybody has their, exceptions, whatever. But I say, well, I think it's dumb not to take it. But I'm not a fan of a non-vaccine or pro-vaccine sports team or person, whatever. I have no skin in that game. It's just like, present me the facts. Here's my opinion. I eat a lot of meat, and I've eaten a lot of meat my whole life. I'm American and Texan even. It's very much a part of our culture. So when things are that wrapped up in it, man, it's taken me weeks of just kind of like, I'm sitting here feeling like, you start to feel bad about what you're doing, and you start to do more research. And so I feel like I'm on kind of a journey of trying to be more, sustainable and ethical with these things, more conscious about the stuff that I eat and stuff like that. And it's probably a never ending journey, but I think what you're talking about that's the slogan from COVID, like it takes all of us, but it really does, because I think the more and more people kind of catch on to this stuff and talk about it, the less undoable it seems, the less unrealistic it seems. And the more kind of like, all of a sudden you are able to buy milk from cows that came down the street, as like a normal thing in your supermarket. All of a sudden it is normal to see like a regional label on your meat that says, kind of where it was produced or whatever. And I hope that, because there's a lot of, doom and gloom in the world right now. I think like right now, as we're filming this, the COP26 climate stuff is going on in Glasgow, and there's a lot of negativity in the world. And I think that's one of the problems, is like you could doom scroll all day, every day, and feel like there's nothing that you do. And maybe it's too late. Who knows if we'll get it all fixed, but we have to try to find some positive things and people like you who, can educate us, especially ignorant people like me, when it comes to all this stuff. Like we need more people like you out there kind of giving us positive, examples and telling us what we can do, even if we're not fully ready to do it yet. Like I say, like it's just great that you're out there kind of, I think, doing good for the world. So congratulations on being a good human.
Thank you.
And thank you so much for sitting down with me and, telling your story. Because I always say like the thing for the podcast is like, real conversations with real humans, and just kind of, you're just, a great person, like with this really interesting story and all the stuff that you've done. And I think a lot of people can kind of hear your story and think, I'm also passionate about, because it's not like you think you're going to get famous doing, the Slow Food Youth Network podcast or doing these workshops or anything, but you're something you're passionate about, and you found a way to kind of do things with it that, are pretty cool. So I hope more people can listen to this and think about their passions and see what they can do to affect their communities, or just to have fun with it like you do. So thank you very much for sitting down. Thank you to Isabel as well for putting up with us for an hour and a half. So follow Valentina on Instagram, VALE.gastronome. Yeah, that's it. I'll link to it and all the stuff as well, also on the Spotify notes and all that. So hopefully your followers will skyrocket after this episode goes live. But thank you very much. And it was a lovely conversation, Valentina.
Thank you so much, Lucas, for inviting me. And Isabel as well. Also, if there are like new moms with newborns here listening, please get in touch, because it's always nice to have also young moms communities to exchange advice. And
yes. And if there's any other interesting people out there who feel like, no, I can't do a podcast because I have a baby, disproven. Come do the podcast. Bring your baby. Babies are welcome on the Lucas Weaver Show. All right.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.